That's okay, Vincent. That was a great panel. Lots of good info out there. Good morning, and again, thanks, Vincent. I'm Kevin Gallo, one of the directors in GSA's Office of Enterprise Technology Solutions, and we develop and manage government-wide contracts such as the Enterprise Infrastructure Solutions, or EIS vehicle, and Mobility Special Item Number on the multiple award schedules. And for a time last year, I had the opportunity to serve as one of the FMG co-chairs. So we just heard from some of the leaders in government. Now let's turn to the industry perspective and leading 5G providers. We've been talking about 5G for a while. I mean, you can see that a number of government agencies are putting significant effort into it. There's considerable activity around the national strategy to secure 5G. But the technology is still early in its life cycle, of course. There's a delay between when a 5G standard, such as the 3GPP releases, and then when there's commercial availability and deployment. The commercial marketplace, an ecosystem is still evolving. And as we definitely heard in that last panel, we need to consider the security, resilience, and supply chain risk management. Government agencies are being very deliberate in their approach to these items. So where are we with 5G rollout and adoption? Have we begun seeing real world application of 5G and realization of the benefits, and what is the reality here and what's the hype? And I think we have just the right panelists here to help answer some of those questions. So on today's panel, we have Roger Wong from AT&T, Max Silber from Metel, Nick Nolan from Verizon, and Mark McDermott from T-Mobile. So next, what I'm going to do is ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit highlighting the work that they're doing in 5G. So first, I'll turn it over to you, Roger.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Roger Wong with AT&T Public Sector, and I've been in wireless industry for over 25 years and with AT&T for the past 10. I've worn many hats in that time period, from system engineer, field implementation manager, tech manager, and in my current role as senior principal architect, I'm responsible for end-to-end 5G architecture design, technology education, and solutions development supporting all federal customers. So from what we're doing in 5G, so from a deployment perspective, we've announced AT&T 5G is available nationwide since summer of 2020. This is our low-band 5G service covering more than 255 million people in more than 18,000 cities and towns across the United States as of January of this year. We've introduced our mid-band 5G Plus service in parts of 8 metro areas earlier this year, and we're expanding rapidly with a goal of reaching 200 million customers by the end of 2023. We offer ultra-fast 5G Plus over millimeter wave in high traffic areas to provide extra speed and capacity, including parts of 44 cities and in 40 stadiums and venues thus far, with more to come. Places such as, I'm sure that a lot of people here have flown through Chicago O'Hare Airport. That's one of the locations where we cover. And in addition to that, City of Atlanta, for example, right here in DC, Capital One Arena, and of course, the AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas, just to name a few. From a network perspective, our initial deployment strategy used millimeter wave spectrum to offer 5G Plus in iconic locations and key venues where demand on our network is high and extra capacity is in coverage is needed. And we'll continue to densify our 5G Plus network in 2022. And since 2007, mobile data across our network, and I'm sure across everyone's mobile network, has grown dramatically. In our case, it has grown from 2007 to the end of fourth quarter last year, 860,000%. And our AT&T Global Network carries more than 484 petabytes of data traffic on an average business day at the end of last year. Lastly, we're currently developing and testing our next-gen 5G core called Standalone Core, or SA Core, to enable cloud-native network function and network slicing. And we'll continue investing in our network infrastructure to build out our 5G services and keep up with the growth and demand. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Roger. I'll turn over to you, Max.
Yeah, good morning. Hi, everyone. Max Silber, VP of Mobility and IoT for Mettel. I've been at Mettel for 10 years now, serving both federal as well as commercial customers nationwide and in some cases globally. Mettel's different in that it takes the customer's point of view. We implement all the great networks represented on the panel today for the customer and implement the right network based on where that specific end user's geography is. So where we can get the best 5G access on one of the networks in one metropolitan area versus another network on another, but all under a single program. We also take the point of view of implementing a complete ecosystem of services, not just device and plan. So most of our end users representing government or private sector receive a device that's fully provisioned and ready to use, able to provision itself over the air with all the necessary applications, as well as care for anything that might happen day two, like if the device breaks. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And to you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Nick Nyland, I'm the Director of Federal Sales here at Verizon. And I've been with Verizon it'll be 19 years this summer. It's been a while, but it's been a great ride. For the last 14, I've been supporting our public sector customers, government agencies, both in state and local and in federal. Things like I led our solution engineering team for our Department of Defense for a few years. That included IoT services, Internet of Things services, mobility services from Verizon. For the last 4 years, I was actually the head of our public sector product management and product development, where we launched things like our Verizon Frontline services, a dedicated support and services and solutions for our public safety community, as well as our first on-site or private LTE solutions for government. And then for the last 9 years, I've been supporting our federal agencies and really focused just on their mission and how we at Verizon can help support and enable their mission outcomes, leveraging our technologies. And so some of the things you heard from my counterparts here are things that we're focused on here, right? It's generating those next network modernization solutions, pushing the network forward while focusing on the customer outcomes and needs that are enabling those network transformation services. So things like moving into software-defined wide area networking, network function virtualization, and the security that is needed to enable those, and really setting that as the base of where we're going with 5G so that we can really enable the huge data transfer that is necessary and needed and required for our federal agencies. So that's just a little bit about what we're doing and a little bit about my background. I'm excited for the rest of the conversation though.
Thank you very much. All right, and last we have Mark. Is Mark McDermott from T-Mobile. Or technical difficulties, it looks like. Okay, we'll just move on to some of the questions here. So I'm going to start off with one question. And by the way, the audience, feel free to chat in questions there in the Q&A. I'll try to take some of those and intersperse some there too. But ask this question for you, Max. What do you think folks in the room need to know? You know, in particular, from your perspective, what's truth versus myth regarding 5G and 5G adoption?
Yeah, so I mean, that's part of what we've been positioning or fighting against. And I know most of the folks representing the carrier here are more on the design infrastructure and implementation side, not part of marketing, which kind of did 5G, I think, when we first launched it, a disservice. So I think one of the primary components for people to kind of the gotchas to look out for, and we deal with this for our customers every day. The first is availability. 5G is so much better than it was, you know, probably a year ago, even if we look back as little as 12 months, but it's still not available across every network in every specific region. And it's not just metropolitan. And I think some of the folks highlighted, there's certain metropolitan areas that are good with one specific carrier and others that are much stronger with another. So the component of availability, and that's part of what we do for customers in our program, is really important. You have to look at the geography, obviously not just of the agency, but of the end user using that edge device. So availability is a big one, especially when you're running private networks or private APNs for any kind of federal agency use. The other big one for me is latency. When I started in this business, it's probably early to mid 90s, just to age myself. And I started out in satellite communications. And back then, we thought we did great. We had, satellite circuits giving us 250 millisecond delays per leg. And we just thought there's no way it's ever going to get any better than that. Now, today, if I run a speed test and I'm visiting some friends down in Miami on my 5G device, I'll probably get 2 milliseconds and probably about 200 megabits per second of speeds. So that's really good. But if you want to completely cut the cord, if you really want to go completely wireless as an agency, you really have to get sub 1 millisecond to get all the way down to edge computing. And I think that brings me back as I joined right as the last panel was wrapping up, and you had that question out there, what are some of those primary challenges that people see in implementing 5G? And it's interesting because it ties into my last point, which is the perception. The perception is you almost have to be all the way there for everyone to be bought in to cut the cord and start to implement 5G based devices. Whereas from my point of view, probably 90% of what we do every day can be served by cutting the cord and going 5G. We use predominantly email. We use collaboration engines, whether we're on Zoom right now or Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams. It doesn't really matter. The video collaboration, the file collaboration, that can all be handled by implementing 5G ready devices down to end users that could be home-based or location-based. So I think changing that perception that, well, we haven't gotten to sub 1 millisecond yet, so let's just hold off on the 5G. I think that's a mistake. I think getting all the way down to those edge-based applications, yes, you probably still need wires until we get there with those specific speeds. But to be sitting here, in Miami running 200 milliseconds with a 2 millisecond 200 megabits per second with a 2 millisecond delay, that pretty much replaces a broadband connection. So I think we're pretty much there as far as perception goes. And then lastly, I'll say on the perception, most agencies I've worked with, they buy in only one way. They want a plan with a device. And I think it's very two-dimensional. I think as we move to 5G, you have to start thinking very three-dimensional. What applications are going to be on the device that are going to be supporting the device? How is the entire ecosystem going to run as a service, or what we do for commercial customers today, which we call mobile device as a service? So I think that perception needs to change as well for 5G to be completely adopted within federal agencies, as well as the way it's being adopted in the private sector.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Max. Roger, I'll turn it over to you here to get your perspective on this as far as what you think some of the most important things that the audience should know, and what is fact versus fiction regarding the state of 5G.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I do a lot of customer engagement, and a lot of times I encounter what seems to be the focus is the misunderstanding that centers around the fact that 5G is customizable, which is unlike any previous technologies before, right? So speed, latency, and coverage depends what aspect of 5G is deployed in a particular area. So let's start with speed. So speed is related to the available RF bandwidth, right? In order to get the ultra high speeds, you also need enough bandwidth to support those speeds. The highest bandwidth are generally available at the millimeter wave frequencies. So you're going to get the highest ultra lightning fast speeds in the millimeter wave bands or high bands, right? And also note that although 3GPP has targets for speeds and latency, the industry is not yet near those targets. And second, about latency. A lot of people talk about 1 millisecond latency, right? That you hear all the hype in the press and in the industry. But people need to understand that that's only the over-the-air latency one way, but not end-to-end. And that over-the-air latency reduction is possible primarily in C-band and millimeter wave bands because of certain physical characteristics, right? And there are of course, there are ways to reduce end-to-end latency by offloading user traffic at the edge, such as using a CUPS which stands for Control and User Plane Separation Architecture. So you get a lot of latency from that type of architecture. And finally, coverage. There are many facets of 5G, as I just mentioned: low band, mid band, and high band. Different propagation characteristics depends on what band you're in. For example, low band, great coverage, good in building penetration, but limited spectrum bandwidth. Features such as carrier aggregation can help, but won't get you to the full millimeter wave spectrum availability. Mid-band propagates and penetrates much better than millimeter wave, but not as good as low band. Now, high band or millimeter wave provides ultra high speeds, but doesn't propagate very far, nor does it penetrate walls or buildings very well. So those are kind of, from my experience, a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around 5G is mainly to the fact that 5G is customizable, which is a new paradigm shift, right, in a cellular ecosystem. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. Yes, 5G, that is something to consider, the customizable aspect of it. It's a complex standard there with 5G,
right.
You know, the different bands, and 5G, it's not, you can't be viewed as just a little niche technology. It, you know, as we heard from Nick at the beginning, how it, you know, 5G, how it really kind of ties into a broader infrastructure here, both on the carrier side and also on the enterprise side there. And I mean, the number of use cases and missions and how it affects, you know, it can impact a mission is so broad, you know, just like was what you know, Max is talking about. Imagine the power of being able to cut the cord here for everything you're doing. And I mean, I think you can, any single government agency, you can look at part of their mission and some of their operations about what an impact that has. So can I go ahead and move on to the next question here? And again, just a reminder to the audience, feel free to chat in, you know, a Q&A, and we should have time to pick up a few of those also. But this question, I'll ask this one for you, Nick. What practices are your commercial enterprise customers adopting using 5G that the government could benefit from or learn from?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And I appreciate all the comments from Max and Roger as well. I think we're pretty well aligned in what we believe 5G can do and what technologies we're rolling out. From Roger's perspective on the low, medium, or mid, and the high bandwidth or the high spectrum, we're certainly seeing the same thing, right? So we're seeing enterprise customers think differently about what networks they choose to deploy, right? And that's going to be based on, you know, propagation. It's going to be based on latency needs. It's going to be based on bandwidth requirements. And the nice thing about Verizon is that we have each of those options, right? 5G nationwide, 5G ultra wideband with millimeter wave, and then now 5G midband, which is our C-band, which already covers 95 million people. So if you're going to use the already deployed Verizon 5G network, we're having enterprises use that today because of the massive deployment that we've been able to achieve. By the end of this year, we anticipate C-band, 5G ultra wideband to cover 175 million people and 250 million Americans by the end of 2024. So what we're seeing is that enterprise customers are already looking at what's deployed, and that's really exciting, because Verizon was the very first network in the world to turn on a 3GPP 5G network. And we even launched 5G Home to Max's point on replacing broadband back in 2018 before the standard. So we've learned a lot over the last 4 years. And what's really exciting is those enterprise customers are coming to us to ideate and innovate together in our labs or in theirs, indoor or outdoor. And going back to the previous panel, they talked about the poll question showed that use cases is the biggest hurdle to adopting 5G, which I thought was interesting. It's something I've seen, but it is on the enterprise side as well. So what we always start with is an engagement where we just start with a whiteboard. What are your problems? What are you trying to solve for? And what can't existing networks do for you today? And then we start ideating on, okay, maybe that's a use case for 5G. Maybe that's a use case for 5G. And what Verizon can bring to the table there is a deep infrastructure knowledge of networks and what we've done for other customers. And then we start applying different use cases. And then we take that next step with our enterprise customers. And then we get into, okay, but what do you need to do to be ready to deploy 5G? Do you need nationwide? Do you need C-band? Do you need millimeter wave? And then not only that, because we're not just thinking about the network and the price plan and the device, we're thinking about, what about the data going over the network? What about the storage of your applications? What apps are you using? What about analytics and processing? Are you putting those in a mech, or are you just sending them to long-term storage? So all of these come into play of, do we need to upgrade your legacy infrastructure to be able to support a 5G deployment? So being a massive network organization and company, we're able to look at this holistically when we think about the use case at the endpoint. And so what we've seen is companies like AWS and Microsoft and Google working with us on our MEC offering, our multi-access edge compute, IBM and Cisco, SAP, Deloitte. I mean, I can keep going down the list. They're all looking at right now, testing out those use cases, but it's really hand in hand around a whiteboard and then in the labs, rolling up our sleeves together to figure out what works and then taking that to other customers. And it's not just enterprise. We have federal customers doing the same thing today, ideating and partnering with us to roll out solutions either in R&D, T&E, or even out in full deployments. So really excited about everything we're doing, not just in enterprise, but right now in federal.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, I see one question got chatted in here, and I'm going to open this up to any of our panelists. And it's, are you able to provide private 5G services in the millimeter band? Or is that band reserved to your commercial services only?
I'll just jump in. Absolutely. we are doing private 5G services today in millimeter wave. When that's the right solution, that can be things like indoor in a large warehouse or factory for factory of the future, like we're doing with the Department of Defense. It could be in terms of venue access in the millimeter wave. To Roger's point, we've lit up a number of venues, and what we've worked on with millimeter wave on private 5G has been accelerated access, getting people through checkpoints and security faster. And then we can do mid-band, C-band, as well as low-band private 5G as well. But millimeter wave is a great use case for private local 5G.
Okay, Max or Roger, is there anything you want to add to that?
I was just going to mention, and I think both Roger and Nick touched on that. The question I ask is why? The question is, again, from a use case perspective, venues is a great example. When you have 50,000 people attending a concert or a sporting event, it makes a ton of sense to do implementation for millimeter wave. In a smart factory, just the amount that you're saving in cable runs and the ability to just really be able to move equipment around without having to move all those cabling around, that makes sense for millimeter wave. But again, and I think I heard Roger say it earlier as well, just to reinforce it, there is a limitation of distance. So if you want to implement private 5G with millimeter wave because you want to run it across a zone that's 100 miles long, we kind of have to ask, like, is there a better way to implement that solution in the field? So that is really specific or use case specific.
Right. I also echo what Nick and Max just said, and it really depends on the use case. And Nick hit the nail on the head earlier. It's always about the use case. So that's where the 5G customizability part of it comes in. So so that we can understand what the end customer's needs are, and we can design a solution around it that will satisfy their needs. So millimeter waves, yes, we offer that, and in a private cellular network configuration, yeah, that is in our portfolio. And with millimeter wave, given the propagation characteristics, it's much easier for carriers such as our AT&T to contain, and so that we can easily design a solution around that, as long as the customer use case demands it.
Okay, thank you. And I saw another face popping up here. I don't know, Mark, have you been able to join? Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that as a no. Probably someone getting ready for the next session. But in the government panel, quite a bit of discussion about security and supply chain risk management there. So one question, I'll open this up to any of the panelists, is can 5G be more secure than previous wireless generations, with higher levels of security for the network, user access, and data? So if there's anything you'd like to share about that, your thoughts.
Sure, I'll chime in here. Yes, 5G, there's a lot of talk in the media about 5G being less secure, but people and everyone needs to understand that the threat vector has increased with 5G because, why? Because 5G allows a lot more devices on the network. Per specifications, you allow 1 million subscribers within 1 square kilometer. That's 0.6 miles by 0.6 mile square grid. That's a lot more than previous technology. So therefore, the end user devices are opened up for potentially more threats. And the standards has been addressing security and building security into development of 5G from the get-go. So that work continues today in the standards bodies. And we believe 5G will have a level of security enhancement that is better than 4G. And as we further develop 3GPP and O-RAN specifications, there are additional security mechanisms that we're developing, both standards-based and proprietary, to help mitigate additional threat surfaces.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with Roger. We certainly see 5G as potentially more secure, especially on the waveform, right? On the wireless side, the 3GPP standard allows for better security than we've seen in previous wireless generations. However, when we think about cybersecurity and 5G, to Roger's point exactly, more end devices, we think about, what else is that 5G network touching? It's touching endpoint devices, and it's probably connected to other networks, legacy, traditional networks, as well as out to storage environments. And so really you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so what Verizon likes to do with our customers is look at holistically, from data acquisition to data access. How do we think about keeping your data safe and secure, making sure 5G is not the weakest link in that, but that there are no weak links, that we care for the entire end-to-end journey of your data, as well as the access to it. So things like zero trust access and more allow us to look at that holistically.
Yeah, I would just wrap up both those points, and I agree with my colleagues. So the way I look at it from an infrastructure perspective or an infrastructure design perspective, kind of the IT mind in me says, today I have all these users. A lot of them have been home-based over the last couple of years, and they're being secured or accessing servers on my network. Essentially by over-the-top security application, whether it's zero trust, whether I've got mobile device management loaded on mobile devices. As an IT professional, I feel a lot more secure knowing that the network they're accessing it on is either LTE or 5G in comparison to a home-based broadband connection that they're sharing with their kids playing Fortnite or downloading a variety of different games and applications. So I think as a generalist, I'd say I actually feel that mobile technology or cellular technology is safer, especially if you're running, and most of the corporations we service today run private APNs or private networks for their end employees. And that's a much more secure access, regardless of the job function, to access an internal function or an internal network, and compared to just launching a VPN or having an over-the-top application. I think in conjunction with those applications, you ultimately can actually achieve a much safer environment and a much safer infrastructure.
Now, another follow-up question here related to security. So, I know the federal government and many commercial enterprises are now moving to adopt zero trust architectures as a paradigm for security. So, talk a little bit about, how are you bringing zero trust architecture into 5G deployments or deployments that you're doing for your commercial customers or government agencies? So, again, open that up to all the panelists.
Yeah, I'll go back
Go
to
ahead,
what
Nick.
I'll go back to what I was saying before in terms of zero trust. We think about it holistically, where one network is not necessarily a trusted network. We can't think that way anymore. In some cases, more trusted, absolutely. But I think in general, we want to look at the holistic environment, everything from identity access management to the devices on the network to understanding where your data flows are. So we certainly embed a lot of 3GPP security as well as proprietary security into the 5G architecture managed by a NOC SOC. But holistically, when we think about a government agency or even an enterprise, we want to look at ZTA across their entire enterprise access and where their data goes. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily different to 5G. There are some things that are, but when we think about ZTA, we need to look holistically.
Roger or Max, anything else you want to add for that? Or if not, I'll move on to the next question. We do have a few more.
Yeah, I would just say real quick, it's really about how you register every component of the network. You have to look at it very holistically. Zero Trust is a great solution, and it obviously was launched to fight the increase in cybersecurity. But a lot of that is around, and one of the things we help clients with is really getting a full inventory and being able to register every single device. It's never just a connection. Someone could take a SIM card out of one device and put it in another, and now you have a potential breach. So it's about managing all those aspects in order to truly achieve that zero trust architecture and keep that security level very, very high.
Okay. And I see we have another question just coming in. It's where do you stand in regards to spectrum sharing, especially automatic resolution?
I'd have to defer to
I'm looking at some
engineers on that one.
questions on there. Okay, well, I'll move on to one more here, and this is this might be our last question there, but just talk a little bit about what are you seeing as the most significant challenges in 5G today? You know, either challenges for industry or what you're seeing as challenges for your government government customers. So. Yeah, Nick, looks like you're ready to answer that one. So yeah, I'll give you a chance though. Here, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I would go back to what the previous panel said. I'll listen to my government customers, and that's use cases, right? It's ideating on the art of the possible, so to speak, right? We always kind of like to throw around that term, but it's true. It's what could you never do on a network with a wireless connection before that now, if you could, what would you do? And there's a lot of interesting use cases thrown out like AR, VR, telemedicine, telesurgery, accelerated access to venues. But really it comes down to what is your agency mission? What are your end users struggling with? And what can we do together? And so what we've been able to do at Tyndall, at the Air Force Reserve Command, at the VA hospital in Palo Alto, at Pacific Northwest National Laboratories with the DOE is really just come to a table, sit around a table and talk about what are the problems, what are the mission challenges, sit around a whiteboard and really ideate on what can we do together. And then we can start throwing out ideas that we've seen in enterprise or other government agencies. But really it's an opportunity for the government customer just to think about what are their end user challenges and problems that we can solve together. So I'll go back to what the previous panel said and just say, it's use cases. It's what can we do in this new environment?
Okay, Roger, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, I echo what Nick said there. It's all about the use case, and the challenge is just to understand what the use case is from the federal government. And Nick brought up a good point, in particular the use case of AR/VR. Yeah, well, it depends, just saying AR/VR, it really depends, okay, and what type of AR/VR are you using? What's the resolution? What's the latency requirement? You have folks that are extremely latency sensitive. So those are some inputs to a design criteria that into a overall solution that we will come up with a solution for the customer there. So it's use case. That's the first thing that we have to define and find out from then what the customer needs are.
Max?
So I think the way I kind of look at the world is there's two types of 5G. You've got millimeter wave 5G, which to me is very use case specific, whether it's a venue or a manufacturing plant. And then there's the use case for kind of everything else, which is still used, predominantly probably out there in government today. And the use case for that is more around going back and running a usage report for your top applications. If you know what your end users within your agency are using today, day in and day out, then you can start to look at how you're implementing technology in the field today versus what you could do if you provided a new device to that end user, a 5G capable device to that end user. If you've been kind of noodling, should we do it, shouldn't we do it? That's usually the way I run those two worlds separately, because there's a lot of benefit, and certainly on the private sector, on corporate customers, we've implemented a tremendous amount of device refreshes out there that maybe 2 years ago we were kind of hesitant and they were hesitant, but now, and certainly since the FAA and FCC allowed C-band to be activated, we've seen just the surge in demand for doing, I think, what Nick talked about before, just replace the home internet with a 5G circuit, or in the case of most of these end users, replace the device that they have today, which is maybe a 1 or 2 generation back non-5G device with a 5G device, and then start to see where you're getting additional security and additional efficiencies out of that use case versus just looking at it as a let's power up a smart facility or a smart factory or a smart venue with millimeter wave 5G.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts in here and for your comments for today's panel. And I covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Also, thanks to the audience for the questions. I see we still have a number of questions that we didn't get to. So I think during the rest of this field, we can answer those questions. Some of them, if we got a chance, we'll answer those offline there.